Entering Tyngsborough. I'm Ronnie Camille. In this episode, we're introducing a new face to the community. His name is Matthew DeCiero, and he's the newest animal control officer in town.
So he tried to catch what he thought was a fox that got it. Unfortunately, he caught a bobcat, which was not what he thought it was. So I got a call one day that says, "Hey, I got a bobcat in a trap. What do I do?" I said, "I'll be right out there."
Matthew brings a unique path to his role, including years in local cable television before moving into public safety and animal control. His work is much more about loose dogs. It touches on public safety and responsible pet ownership and even wildlife concerns. We invited Matthew to introduce himself to the community and explain how the service works. So here's our conversation with him. Matt, welcome to Tyngsborough's Front Porch.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. So for residents who haven't met you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into animal control work?
Yeah, so I have, first off, I am the animal control officer for the town of Tyngsborough and Chelmsford. I came in at the beginning of the fall, end of September, beginning of October, when our former ACO, Mark Cianci, moved on. He is in the police academy, training to be an officer over in Carlisle. So when he decided to move on to a new position, they obviously were looking for a new animal control officer. I applied, and I was lucky enough to be chosen as the one to get the position. So prior to that, I had worked in some other communities as a part-time ACO for the last 3 years. I am from Central Mass area, so I worked for the towns of Holden and for a regional animal control area out in Rutland, which we covered 7 towns out there. Wow. So, and if you want, I'm happy to list them off, but it was 7 towns that we covered. So we covered from, I like to say, from New Braintree all the way out to Boylston.
Wow. That's a lot of territory.
It's a lot of territory for it. And we were out there, we were full-timer that ran Monday through Friday, and then I would work on the weekends or Friday evenings through Saturday, Sunday. So it was still just a one-person ACO on during that time frame, but covering all that territory. And then same when Holden, I was the weekend ACO, so I was always covering the town by myself, and then I would go mutual aid if need be to other communities.
Yeah, sure. And how did you fall into this line of work? Because I mean, I was looking at your background, and we've spoken off air, and you know, we're taping at our partners here in Westford. You started out in the media world. You started out in local TV and cable access. How did that transition happen?
So if you go way back into my college years, I majored in broadcasting and telecommunications, did a stint at Channel 5 in Needham for a while as a freelance video producer, cut a lot of the newscasts that you saw in the morning and the evening time. And then I went on to local access television for the last 15 years or so, doing that in a multitude of spots across the state. I have worked everywhere from Northeast Central right out. I worked in Waltham for a while. I also worked for the city of Worcester, city of Gardner, and then most recently for the town of Oxford, before coming over here to Chelmsford and Tyngsborough. So have a lot of media background. Unfortunately, due to, and I will advocate this always because PEG is still a public education and government media is still close to my heart. There is funding is tough, and as people are cutting the cord, it is tougher and tougher for us to stay alive and keep our funding because it's all through subscription base. So what you guys do here is critical because it is all very local media-based source news, so which is great because of the fact that you don't get that as much because there's certain pockets of the state where there's not as much media coverage as there used to be, or, you know, it's harder. Small town newspapers aren't small town newspapers anymore. They're owned by big conglomerates. So the fact that you can have small media like this that can cover events and community functions and things like that is critical, which is great. So like I said, I did that for 15 years. Unfortunately, my funding was coming to an end in the community I was in. So I had to make a crossroad choice. I have been around animals since the age of 5 when I started doing horseback riding at a very young age, out of first grade. I had a teacher that said, I think you would be really good at that. And so I kind of got into it and never have left horses. So I kind of got into farming really, really young and haven't really left the farming community and lifestyle a little bit. And then that transpired into just more and more animal kind of work, always being around farms, animals, cats, dogs, that kind of stuff. And then when Holden came available, they advertised for a part-time position because somebody had left it. I looked at it and I said, got a lot of animal background. I think I'd be a good fit. Let me try it, see what happens. If not, no skin off my nose. We'll see what happens. Got the position. Did it for 2 years. The neighboring town, I happened to know the full-time person over there. She said, you should really apply. I think you'd be a good fit. And I said, I'm comfortable where I am. And she was like, no, I really think you should apply. I applied and ended up getting the position. Love it over there. That's the one that I do 7 towns. Oh, I was doing 7 towns in. So it was crazy because I saw a lot of different things. We went from, different economical backgrounds that I was dealing with. Sure. And different styles of animals, everything from livestock right on down to, wildlife. So we dealt with a variety of different kinds of animals. Then fast forward to where I am now with Tyngsborough and Chelmsford. Again, different animal sets. We're dealing with still livestock, wildlife calls, domesticated animals, occasionally the few exotics here and there. So I have a wide variety, and luckily through my career and through my experiences, I have the ability to call upon people that I've met through my time to actually, if I get into a situation that I may not know the answer to, I can call upon them and use their expertise to then better my expertise and then get some more information and get it back to the people.
Right. So what's a typical day look like for an animal control officer?
Never the same. It's always ever changing, always evolving. No day is the same. That's probably one of the reasons why a lot of us get into the job. It's very similar to like your police, fire, and EMS. We never know what calls are going to come in during the day. You can try to plan your day as best as you want to, but it doesn't always mean that's the way your day is going to go. So I could, let's say I decide I want to come in and I want to do 3 kennel inspections and I want to do, I got to go talk to a person about the health of their dog, and maybe it's a barking dog complaint and something else. But all of a sudden now we have a 3-car wreck up on Route 3 and state police are calling me because now all of a sudden those people are getting pulled off to the hospital, but yet they had a dog inside the vehicle and now there's no family member nearby because they might be from out of state because they're traveling, or they just don't have anybody nearby. They need me to come grab the dog out of the accident and hold it at our kennel facility until somebody can either come get it or until the owner is released from the hospital. Now all of a sudden my day that I had planned, now that's an urgent matter call and I have to go run off to it. Or as you know very well, unfortunately, we've had some house fires in Tyngsborough lately. So that's another scenario where I get called out to. I try to be there if I get notified early enough. If the fire happens and either fire or police call me early enough, I try to respond to the scene while it's actively happening and try to assist the best way I can. If I get the call after the fact, then I do assist in any way I can as well, and that matters. In the aftermath of it all, it's a tough scenario. We see a lot of heartbreak and a lot of anguish when we go to things like that. So it's a lot on a person. That's why I say a lot of times we're very similar to what police, fire, and EMS see, because we respond to a lot of those similar scenes that they're responding to, because we get called out to the very similar things: fire, car crashes, situations of that nature. Because if there's an animal involved, they're calling us to come respond to it.
So you're at a call, whether it be a motor vehicle accident or a fire, and you pick up a stray animal. What happens after you get the call, you get there, and you retrieve the animal? It's now in your custody, and you're now What happens?
Yep. So there's a couple things that can happen. If we know of an owner, so let's say it's one of those situations, car crash, we know the owner, they're getting taken off to the hospital, fire, they're dealing with the aftermath of a fire, that kind of nature. We'll hold the animal at our kennel facility for as long as we can, until the owner can come, grab them. So we try to help them and accommodate them as much as we can. We also help them in ways of maybe they need, because they've lost something. Maybe we can give them food, or maybe they need some kind of crate to help, contain the animal wherever they're living now, because all of a sudden they've lost it in a fire. Or whether it's, so just some blankets, or a bed, or a dog bed or something like that, or a cat bed. Also we can, so that's if we know the owner. If we don't know the owner, it's a little bit of a different scenario. So what we do in that point is they're called stray animals at that point. That happens quite a few times. So what we do is when we get a call and nobody knows who the owner is, we go and grab the animal. We bring it to the kennel that we have that's located in Chelmsford. And then what we do, I posted on our social media page, which is Chelmsford Tyngsborough Animal Control. You can find it right there on Facebook. And I will post a picture of the animal. And then hopefully, if there is a known owner, the owner will come forward and then they will get their animal back. If not, we do a couple of things. We will scan for a chip, a microchip, which hopefully the animal is microchipped, not always, but sometimes. So if the animal is microchipped, we have a scanner that can run that over the animal and see if they have it. If not, then obviously we look for any kind of markings, tattoos, or any kind of that kind of nature of things. And then if not, then hopefully the picture, somebody will recognize the animal if they don't have tags on them. And by tags, I mean like rabies tags, which helps, is a licensing tag for the town, and kind of gets them back to it. So hopefully between those three methods, we can find a way to get the dog back to the owner. If for some reason we don't find an owner through those three methods, then the dog stays with us for the next 7 days. We hold the dog for 7 days. And then from there, so it's 7 days that we hold the dog for. At the end of the 7-day hold, if we do not find an owner, typically what I will do is I will reach out to Lowell Humane Society or any of the rescues in the area, depending on how full one is. And I will then try to find placement for it at one of our facilities, whether it's Lowell Humane, Boston ARL, or if it's one of the local rescues in town that might be able to take it in a foster rescue kind of place, and go from there. So Spots Place is another one that has popped up recently that has been offering to help with us and work with us as well if we get any kind of animal in that might need a home. So we have some options that we can work with and kind of go from there. So we do try to do, we always try to find the dogs or cats a good home. Sometimes it's not always a dog or a cat. Sometimes it's a guinea pig. Sometimes it's a bird.
I was about to ask you, is it like, you get an exotic pet or a fish or,
lizard? Yeah. So it's a lot of, we get a lot of, I won't call them unusuals, but it's a lot of the oddities. And what are those?
That's a synonym for unusual.
Yes, I know. So a lot of it is, it's not your typical dogs and cats. Not here, but before, I've rescued a goat before that has gone running loose in the streets. What do you do with the goat?
Was this in Lowell?
It was not in Lowell. No,
that was a story at one point.
No, this wasn't in Lowell. I'm sure it was. So this was not. This is actually back where I used to work in Rutland. It was a situation where a goat was running around. Unfortunately, a car had struck it and had done some damage to its leg. So we took it in. Somebody luckily got it into their garage, shut the garage door, got it, brought it into our vehicle, brought it back to our kennel, which was funny to see a goat in a kennel, but did some triage work on it, got it into some good, shape, bandaged it up, tried to get it healthy. Luckily for us, we had a rescue kind of reach out to us that said, we'll take it. And that was good for us because it's really hard to place a goat because there's not a lot of places that go, hey, I want a goat, except for farms. So it worked out well on our end. Another weird thing that I've caught in my career, a peacock. Well, that's not one that you normally can just, call a shelter and go, hey, I got a peacock. Where can I put it?
Right.
So again, luckily that I had some farm connections that was able to go to a farm that wanted one. And so that worked out well. So, those are the two times I can think of that were non-cat or dog based that, you kind of have to get a little creative and think outside the box. But luckily you form those partnerships when you go out with people. A lot of times that comes off of barn inspections. And that's how you kind of form those relationships with your farm community in your town. So,
excuse me. So you're responsible for barn inspections as well on farms?
Yep. So barn inspections, what do those mean? So in the town of Chelmsford and Tyngsborough, obviously that means anything livestock related. So that means anything from chickens right on up to equine and cattle and swine and all that stuff. So what that means is that so once a year we go in, we are the state agent that goes in and we conduct an inspection of the facility. We are checking for the health of the animal. We're also checking to see how the facilities are, to make sure that it's adequate enough for the animal that they're housing it in. And we're just doing an overall health check of the animal and the facility to make sure that it's in good condition. So a lot of people get nervous when I show up and I go, I'm here to do an inspection, because they go, wait a minute, what do you mean? Or depending on how the town was run beforehand, a lot of people say, well, it hasn't been done in 10 years. And I go, well, they're supposed to be done yearly. So I apologize, but now I'm going to be doing them yearly. So what we do is I just go out, we assess the animals, see how, usually 9 times out of 10, they're always a good condition, because people love their animals. Believe it or not, people treat their animals better than they do themselves. So the animals are in good condition. The structures are in good condition. And I always find it funny because people are always like, come here, let me show you the food I feed them. Let me tell you about the vet that I have. Let me tell you about the hoof care that I do. Or, this is what I do for my animals and this is how I care for them. And I go, that's wonderful. And it's great because I learn a lot about them and it shows how much they care about their animal. And it really shows how much time and effort they want to put in and how much they care. So yes, barn inspections are a big part. We also do that too, also because as the state does record all that information, but we do that mainly because God forbid we ever should have a rabies outbreak in the state. We now know where all the livestock are kept, and that's why we do it. So we can kind of monitor. So in case we have a large outbreak of anything, the state now knows where all those livestock are. And not only that, but they also, if we ever have a natural disaster, God forbid we should have a hurricane, tornado, any of that nature, and all of a sudden it comes ripping through Tyngsborough and all of our animals should get loose for some reason. 9 times out of 10, the farmers kind of know where they all go. But if not, and they call up and they go, hey, I got this horse here, I got this cow over here, or this pig here, where does it go? Sometimes we can kind of tell off the list of where the animal was found off of where they might belong, and we can kind of start calling people and going, hey, I think you might be missing something. Can you do a head count? And then from there we can kind of get the animal back a little easier. So
interesting. So how do you handle situations where you get called out and an animal is, well, aggressive?
Yeah. So, knock on wood, those don't happen very often because people are usually pretty good and kind of recognize those things. However, that's what we're trained for. So if an animal becomes aggressive, there are some protocols and procedures put in place for that for us as ACOs. One of the things so a lot of things there's a couple things that have to be put in place. Or have to happen, I should say, situationally. So, large spectrum. How much time you got? And I don't mean that in a mean way.
Take all the time you need.
I know. So there's a couple. I'll give you an extreme situation. Dangerous dog could be something as simple as dog run. So for both towns that we cover, specifically Tyngsborough, it's a 24/7 leash law.
Yes.
So
well, I have questions about that.
Yes. Yeah. So, but what that means is that the dog has to be, the the dog has to be confined to the property at all times. And then whether it's through a fence or whether it's on a leash or whether it's on one of those like dog run type things.
Yeah.
So can't leave your yard. So with that being said, this is my example to you. Dog gets out of your property, runs across the street, goes after another dog, injures the dog pretty severely. Now all of a sudden that dog didn't make it. We deal with this situation a couple times. It happens in our career quite a bit. Now all of a sudden we have this dog that now has attacked somebody. Now what do? Well, for starters, we take that dog and we quarantine it for 10 days. One, to make sure that there's no rabies exposure to it.
Okay.
Then after that, we can do a couple different scenarios to it. One scenario, and by scenarios, I mean there's a couple different routes we can take. So one route we can do is we can go and we can look at the dog. Is it a one-time isolated incident, or is now this the third or fourth time it's happened? If it's the third or fourth time it's happened, we're having a different probably conversation. If it's the first time it's happened, then we might be doing something looking at either a nuisance or dangerous dog hearing, which is run through the select board of the town, because they are the hearing agent of those complaints.
Yes.
So what that is basically a person from the town has the right through Mass General Law to file a nuisance or dangerous dog complaint to the select board to be heard. And then at that point, it is my duty as the animal control officer. I'm charged with the duty of investigating that complaint and finding out from the complainant and the dog owner kind of what the situation is, investigating it, and then bringing that information forward. And then usually we have a hearing. The complainant and the dog owner are at the hearing, and then they each say their side of their story of what's going on, and then I bring forth what I have found, and then a recommendation as to what I feel should go forth for stipulations moving forward. The board hears that, and then from there the board renders a decision on what they feel is adequate. They can either take my recommendation, or they can take my recommendation and then further it from there, more or less depending on what they feel. And then from there, usually sometimes it's we revisit it in so many months. Sometimes it's we revisit in so many weeks, depending on what the board feels. And then from there, I go back out and make sure that they follow the guidelines that the board has put forth.
So, with that being all said, what should residents understand about our town's leash law? In simplest terms.
How many of the residents?
I mean, what they should understand? What should they know about the leash law in town?
So Tyngsborough residents should know that we have a 24/7 leash law. So what that means is, first off, probably the biggest thing I can stress is if your dog should get out, please call the non-emergency police number and report it. Because what that does is when you call the non-emergency police number to report your dog out, it activates dispatch to call me to notify me that the dog is out. I would much rather see that than for it to be posted on Tyngsborough Talk. Because now I know if I pick up a dog, I know where it goes to, or at least it's out and it's running around. I will respond out to that location, depending on the time of the day in the evening and what I have for call volume. So what I mean by that is my job is a lot of triaging calls and figuring out what's of high importance. Not saying that all calls aren't important. It's just saying that I have to figure out which ones demand the attention of the highest priority. So obviously a dog running around in a roadway, very important because that's a public safety issue, because now the dog is running at large. Traffic now because of the fact that a car could hit it, and now that we don't want to see a dog get hit and get injured. And also the fact that, if it's running at large, how friendly is it? Some dogs are very friendly, even though they're running around at large. Some are not. So that's a matter we have to resolve quickly. So I'd rather see somebody call the non-emergency number, report it. And I'd rather see that than me go pick it up, me post it on our page, and then you just show up at the police station and go, oh, yeah, I'm here to collect my dog that I saw posted, without even contacting anybody. So that's the most important thing. Also, the leash law is in place. It's not because we're here to be, We're not here trying to put more rules and regs on everybody. We're doing that a lot for safety too. It's for the safety of your dog, the safety of your neighbor's dogs, and also for the safety of the public. It's not saying that every dog is dangerous or a nuisance. It's just to say that, again, for that scenario, you don't want your dog getting out into the roadway, running around, and then having a car come around the corner and hit it. Because now all of a sudden, now your dog's injured. Now you got to go take it to a vet. Now that's unfortunately an inconvenience that you weren't expecting for the day, which is not great. Now, or God forbid, you lose your family pet member that you care deeply about. And I don't like seeing that. And I hate having to be the one that have to deliver that news to people. And it's not a fun job to do that. It's no different than having to do a notification of somebody passing. It's not fun because people really take these pets seriously. And I understand that because they become extensions of your family, especially when you've had them for 5, 6, even 8 years or more, so.
Yeah, right. What does responsible pet ownership mean to you?
I think that for me personally, responsible pet ownership means that you, one, license your dog, which, as you know, is we license every year from December to the end of February. You can go to the town hall and get your license membership, which luckily Tyngsborough is probably one of the cheapest registrations for dog licensing across the state. I'm pretty sure it's probably one of the cheaper ones out there. If you look at our neighboring town, which I cover, Chelmsford, that's at least a $20 registration fee compared to Tyngsborough's $7. So, it's not very much, but it's the reason why we ask people to do the registration of the dogs. One is because if your dog is registered and should happen to get out and it's wearing a tag, it's much easier for me to read the tag number and then get the dog back to you safely. If it's not, the tag's not on it and I still get the dog, sometimes judging by where it's located in the description, I can still go look at the registry and go, here's the dogs. Here's the dog. It's kind of in this area. Maybe we can figure out where it goes and then kind of call around and figure it out. Because usually there's not 2 of the same dogs in the area. Also, what that means is getting your dog vaccinated for rabies and distemper. Very huge thing because obviously across the state of Massachusetts, distemper has been a little bit more on the rise over the last couple of years.
What is that? Sorry.
Distemper is a neurological disease that takes place. It's usually more in wildlife you see it. So it's been affecting more the raccoon possum population lately, but obviously we have those running around in our area. So a lot of people will sometimes mistake it for rabies because they see it more in those animals. So I get a lot of calls for that. And usually it's the smaller wildlife that we see it in. So your skunks, your raccoons, your possums, sometimes squirrels, but more those raccoons and possums and squirrels. Skunks. So vaccination's key. One, because that keeps you safe from any exposure of anything should your dog get bitten by a wildlife animal. And also it helps too because if your dog, one, if you get bit, it saves you from getting a round of shots if your dog's not vaccinated. Because the first thing they'll do is they'll ask when a dog bites either another dog or a human, I get a report from the local hospital because they're mandated reporters through MGL law. That's one of the requirements. So if they send me a report, I contact the person who was bit and I contact the dog owner. Sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's not. But the first question I'll ask the person is your dog vaccinated? And can you provide proof? If they provide proof and they can show it to me, then I go, okay. Sometimes that's great because they do it through when they do the licensing, so I can already see it that way and it's easy. Right. So if they do that, then I don't have to worry about it as much. But if they don't have the dog vaccinated, all of a sudden now they have to go for 3 rounds of shots, rabies shots, because now the problem is they could possibly have been exposed to rabies. And it's not a fun process. I can tell you because when I started the job, they had to have me go for rabies shots because it's a requirement for the position because we deal with all kinds of animals and we can be bit and we don't know what we're dealing with. So it's a requirement for us. Also, the other side of being a responsible pet owner is so besides the vaccination and the licensing is just following the rules. And what is that? The bylaws of the town. Being a responsible pet owner, following those guidelines. I would love it if everybody did. Would it put me out of a job? Maybe. But at the same time, I would love to see everybody following those rules, taking really good care of their animals. I understand that, you go to open a door for an Amazon package, dog slips out,
Right.
gets away. I understand those kind of, situations that happen. But, things like, we've had a lot of snow so far this winter, clearing away snow from the fence line. So therefore your dog can't jump out and over the fence line and get out. Those are things that are preventable. Believe it or not, that's a lot of common causes. All of a sudden we got 2 feet, plus now there's some drifting. Now we've got another 3 inches. We have some more coming. It stacks up. All of a sudden your 4-foot high fence becomes 2 feet and your dog can jump that very easily. So, those kind of things can be very preventable and keep your dog within the property line and all that. So
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier in the conversation about wildlife. What kind of wildlife calls do you you've been with us for a little bit now. What kind of wildlife calls are you seeing here in our community?
yeah, so I can tell you some that happen here and some that have happened outside of here. Because
Tyngsborough.
yeah, I can. So for Tyngsborough specifically, when I first came here, a gentleman had something get into his chicken coop and kill all of his chickens. It was very sad. But he was trying to trap whatever killed his chickens to figure out what it was, which, and he had every right to do that because, he was in accordance with that. Environmental police said he was allowed to do that. So he tried to catch what he thought was a fox that got it. Unfortunately, he caught a bobcat, which was not what he thought it was. So I got a call one day that says, "Hey, I got a bobcat in a trap. What do I do?" I said, "I'll be right out there." So I went out with one of the sergeants from Tyngsborough PD, and then I also went out with one of the patrol officers. And they said, "What are we going to do for this?" I said, "Well, for starters," I said, "we're not going to try to agitate it too much because it's a bobcat." And so I said, "What we're going to do is we're going to tie some rope to the front of the cage." I said, "We're going to stand behind the cage and we're going to try to pop this door open." I said, "If everything goes well, it should just run straight out front and ahead of us." I said, "But if it turns around and comes at us," I said, "we'll be prepared." And they were like, "Okay." So I had my snare pole, the little rabies catch pole that we have with the loop on the end. I had that ready just in case it came back at us. And the officers were ready as well in case it should come back at us. But luckily for us, when I popped that door open, it was so frightened that it shot right off into the wood line, and it ran nicely into the wood line and ran away from us. And it was a big bobcat. And I always, whenever it's anything wildlife, I always consult with the environmental police. And the reason for that is environmental police have reign over anything wildlife. So although, yes, you can call us for a wildlife call, the ultimate ruler of wildlife law is environmental police. So a lot of times, because there's so little of them in the state and they're running all over the place, a lot of people will call animal control because there's so many of us and we're all localized.
Sure.
So we get the call. I like to say we're the in-between person for them. So I'll go out, I'll triage the call. I'll call their dispatch and go, "This is what I got. How would you like me to handle it?" Then they'll call me back, either a captain, sergeant, whatever they have on that day. And they'll go, "This is how we advise you to handle it." And I go, "Okay." And then I handle accordingly. So, and they do appreciate the fact that we call and kind of, ask them for their guidance and kind of go from there. If it's something really big brewing that we got going on, they'll be like, "Stand by, secure the area and we'll be there as soon as we can be." And I go, "Okay." And then I just kind of sit there and I wait for them. So, luckily we haven't had any of those yet, but, yes. But, the good thing is a lot of times we get the call, nothing major. We'll advise you to either, let it go or triage it or, go from there and then kind of move on.
So what would you recommend the public? Because, they'll post on social media, "Oh, look at that bobcat. Look at that bear." We've had bears. We've had moose. Yeah. We've had all sorts of wildlife. I mean, whether they're injured or not, what's your first recommendation?
Well, I'll tell you, though, I have had a tremendous amount of weasel calls out here.
Weasels.
Yeah, it is I'm becoming very familiar with the northern weasel. I've had at least 3 calls for northern weasels out here, which is...
What are they doing?
So some of them have been in houses. They get in the house. They have a very unique smell. You'll be able to smell it very distinctly. It's a very musty smell. A lot of them are coming in right now because of the winter time, and they just love being inside. The other part too is one was up in an engine block of a car in one of the shopping plazas here in Tyngsborough. Again, warm spot. Car's running. It's nice and warm. Gets up in the engine block, ran up in the hood area.
How does one realize that they have a weasel in their vehicle?
Well, she went to go start the car, and it kind of popped up through the hood. And come to find out, she had a little plastic piece that was missing up near the windshield area. And so I said, hey, I think this is where it's coming in and out. So she goes, I'm going to the dealership tomorrow. I said, perfect. I said, you might want to take care of that. And then we could never find it because I saw it pop out and down. And it went so down into the engine block that I said to her, I said, I don't know where it went. I said, and I could get under your car and look. But I said, I'll be honest with you. I said, this thing's so small, it could climb anywhere. And she goes, what do I do? I said, well, when you get to the car dealership tomorrow, tell them that you have a weasel somewhere in your car and see if they'll kind of like poke and investigate. I said, sometimes they do that, believe it or not. And she goes, what? And I said, yeah. And she goes, can I drive with it? I said, absolutely, you can drive with it. I said, don't worry about it. I said, he's probably hidden pretty well. And, I said, that's kind of how it goes. Believe it or not, that happens a lot. We have a lot of wildlife that get up into some really strange and peculiar areas. And we try to do our best to get it out. But, we can only, if they want to be hidden, they want to be hidden. We can't get to them all. So.
Did you ever get a... I'm sorry. It's too funny. I mean, imagine being on the receiving end of that call. Excuse me, at the dealership. Do you have a photo? Is there a photo of this out there?
I do not have a photo because, ironically, weasels are very fast. So he moved very quickly. He actually pulled down the insulation and went between the insulation and the hood. So when the woman was like, I think he's in the hood, I just did, okay. I said, well, let's use some common sense. So I just rapped on the hood a few times. He popped out enough where he came out through like the hood in the windshield area. And I saw him pop down into the plastic area. And I went, he went down into the engine block area again. I'm like, all right. So I popped the hood open, went to go look, and I went, yeah, I can't find him. And I was like, he's so far down in there. And she's like, can I drive the car? And I said, yeah, you can. She goes, well, I heard it. I said, I don't think you'll hurt it. Because I said, wherever he is, he's hung in there this long. You drove here with him. You can probably drive home without him. I said, by chance, did you leave the car outside last night? And she goes, yeah. I said, you have a garage, don't you? She goes, yeah. I said, that's probably why. I said, you left the warm car outside in the cold weather. It probably snuck up in there to get some warmth. I said, so you're probably going to be living with this guy for a little while until he gets out. I said, that's why I would recommend the mechanics take a look and see if they can find it and yank it out of there for you.
Wow.
Because the problem is I'm not going to be trained enough to pull apart an engine block for you to go find an animal.
Sure.
So, and nor do I really want to take the liability of going up into someone's car and start poking around. So
Matt, what can homeowners do to reduce conflicts between wildlife, their property, and their pets?
So the best thing you can do for wildlife specifically, let's go with the large animals, your deer, your bear, and your moose. The best thing to do is not put out attractants. What does that mean? Birdseed, any kind of food that would attract them in, that kind of nature. You cannot, it's not good to feed wildlife because the problem is once you feed them, they want to start coming back because they know there's a food source there.
And they'll invite their friends.
Correct. So the one thing you want to be very careful of is the fact that once you start inviting wildlife over, they're going to bring their friends, and now that becomes a very dangerous situation. If you have an 800-pound bear coming around because you feed it, and one day you stop feeding it, the bear's going to become angry. And when the bear becomes angry, he's going to lash out. And I cannot predict what's going to happen, but I have a fairly good idea what might happen there. So you have to be mindful of that yes, you might think you're doing a good deed by feeding it in the wintertime or in the fall so it bulks up and all that. But believe it or not, the bear will be okay because the bear knows how to find its own food source. Take it on the other realm, though, when you can feed the birds in the wintertime, but just make sure it's after, say, November or the first hard frost. So that way we know that all those animals are kind of more dormant, and there's less chance. So, if you start seeing shepherd's poles being bent or snapped, that means there's a sign of bears being around or larger wildlife. Take them down, bring them in. Same in the spring. We're gonna hopefully get there at some point, but when the springtime starts rolling around, if you have any suet feeders out or bird seed feeders, start bringing those in at night. You can put them out during the day, but you got to bring them in at night, because if you leave them out, then they will start attracting more of those kind of larger wildlife to come around, because the quieter it is, the more they'll come around and investigate.
Is there anything else that you want to share to the people of Tyngsborough while you're here?
Yeah, so I know as we're coming into the end of, we're coming into the end of the winter season almost, kind of here. We're coming into coyote mating season, which is kind of coming to a close. It'll be at the end of March. So obviously when you go out at night, you probably hear them more. They howl and kind of call to each other. So just be mindful of that if you're going out in the evening, that coyotes are much more active now than they used to be. Not only that, but they're also much more territorial. So they will actually defend their ground and their territory much more than they did previously in the last few months. So if you're walking your pet, or if you're going out to just put garbage outside, just be mindful of that when you're going out. I know it's not easy for everybody, but do it during the daylight hours if you can. I understand not everybody can, because I understand hectic lives and all that. So if they can't, then, just be mindful of that if you go out at night. Maybe check the area a couple times before just walking out there, so you're not scaring them and getting up on them too close. The other piece is, I'm available if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. You can always contact me at the non-emergency police number at the police station in Tyngsborough. Also, my email address is animalcontrol@tyngsborough.ma.gov. You can definitely shoot me an email if you have any questions about anything. Also, if you see me out and driving around the big box truck that I have, feel free to stop and wave me down, say hi. I'm very approachable. I love to love to inform people, love to talk to people. I'm always there. If you ever need any more information, I know they are working on updating the website page for the town of Tyngsborough, and especially the police department, but you can go over to the police department page, click on animal control, all the information's right there. So that will be up and running soon. And then also our Facebook page. I have been very, very, as you probably know, I'm very active on our social media page, trying to get information out there. So if you go over to Chelmsford Tyngsborough Animal Control on Facebook, you can find all of our information there. I do try to share it. I do try to put at least a post up at least a couple times a week to try to inform people, not to over inundate people like crazy, but just try to get the word out there about things. And that is exactly the place you want to go if you miss or lose your pet. If you lose your pet and you think I might have it, check over there, because I do try to post pictures of every animal that I pick up. Usually they're dogs, but occasionally they're cats or other animals. But check there, because that's where I'll post all the pictures that I have picked up animals and brought to our kennel. And also the fact of, if I have any information where I'm trying to gather something on a situation that might be happening, I will also post over there as well.
Right.
We had a situation in town not too long ago where I was trying to find the information for a dog owner, and I actually reached out, and luckily that matter was resolved thanks to the residents reaching out to me via phone calls and emails. So it was a great tool to have, and it worked out really well. So I appreciate that, because without that, I would have been an unsolved case that I would have been still trying to figure out and work on. And luckily it went really well. So, and I try to educate people when I go and meet with them, and I try not to, a lot of people have said that they appreciate the fact that I'm very understanding and try to work with them when I go out and meet with them.
Matt DeCiero, Animal Control Officer for Town Tyngsborough. Thanks so much for having us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Matt for explaining his office and his role in the community. You can learn more about his role and the town's bylaws by visiting the town's website at tyngsborough.ma.gov. tyngsborough.gov. For the town of Tyngsborough, I'm Roni Camille, and until next time, wishing you the best of goodbyes.